Chapter 951. As the saying goes, the higher you stand, the further you can see. Wu Ming, who was flying in the sky, could easily see the north wall. Wu Ming once again sighed as he looked at the north wall that traversed the east and west of Mesopotamia not far away. This north wall was built by manpower. If it could be passed down to future generations, it would certainly become an ancient monument not inferior to the pyramids and the Great Wall. After all, it was a defensive barrier against monsters. However, the north wall would not be passed down to future generations. After all, it was a special place called Singularity. Things in Singularity would be corrected by correct history. Perhaps it would be more serious than the legendary hanging courtyard of Babylon. The north wall would be completely lost in the long river of history. However, he still had to overcome the difficulties in front of him. Otherwise, forget about future generations. The entire history of mankind may disappear. Collis, help me find the place with the most prominent signs of life as a landing point. The most prominent signs of life represented the most people. In this case, the chances of encountering the commander of the North Wall would be higher. Wu Ming searched for signs of life below and came to the place with the most prominent signs of life. The soldiers below naturally noticed Wu Ming in the sky. They originally thought that it was an enemy attack, but it turned out to be their god. Is that Hyunryong, Sama? Hyunryong, Sama has come to the North Wall? Hyunryong, Sama. In an instant, the soldiers began to cheer and shouted at Wu Ming. The gods of the gods era were absolute to humans. They were even more powerful than human kings. Although the current Mesopotamia was at the end of the gods era, the people here were still full of respect for the gods. However, this made Wu Ming very helpless. He didn't know what to say. Why did the gods like to spread their faith and collect believers everywhere? Because the ancient human hearts were very simple. If you were good to them, they would praise you, welcome you, and praise you. Besides the evil gods, who didn't like such humans? Wu Ming didn't put on airs and flew straight down. It could be seen that these soldiers were conscientious in their duties. Even in the face of their Lord God, the soldiers who were guarding their posts did not move at all. Other things aside, Leonidas I's training of the soldiers did make them more dutiful. However, the nearby soldiers and logistics personnel who were not in important positions all came to Wu Ming's side and knelt down. Even the soldiers who were standing guard at their posts bowed to Wu Ming in respect of the gods. I didn't come here to accept your worship. All of you, return to your posts. You are the front line, and the safety of the rear is at stake. Therefore move out. Wu Ming's last sentence was infused with magic. His voice, which was full of majesty but not strict, was transmitted to the ears of everyone present. His sonorous and forceful words filled everyone's ears, causing them to cheer energetically. Although, in accordance with the will of the god, everyone returned to their posts. Sir Hyunryong, why are you here today? A rough voice with a hint of delicacy came from afar. Wu Ming looked up. It was a brawny man with most of his skin exposed. He was wearing a Spartan-style helmet and a red cloak. His exposed skin was full of explosive muscles, giving people an extreme sense of security. So it's the king of Sparta. It's been a long time. Wu Ming showed a relieved expression. The person who came was one of the lancers summoned by Gilgamesh, the king of Sparta, Leonidas I. Wu Ming only saw him once when Leonidas I was summoned. After that, Wu Ming quickly left. It seemed that Wu Ming's idea was right. The place with the most prominent signs of life was indeed the forced commander, Leonidas I. Just call me Leonidas. After all, I'm now the subject of the king of Gilgamesh. It was inappropriate for a subject to call himself a king, Leonidas said as he walked in front of Wu Ming. You look good. The soldiers have also been trained by you to be so strong. No wonder you're the king of Sparta. After all, Sparta had become a special synonym in the future. The humans of this era are strong and have an extremely simple temperament. I didn't spend much effort to train them. Wu Ming nodded. It's good that you're satisfied with the physical fitness of the humans of this era. By the way, I'm here on the orders of King Gilgamesh. However, Wu Ming only said this, and Leonidas guessed the reason. It's because of the information I sent to Uruk. The suspected gathering of a large number of demonic beasts was enough to attract attention. Yes, I took over the military advisor's workshop to explore. I did see a large number of demonic beasts gathering in the city of Nippur. Wu Ming told him the information he received. Have you been to the military advisor's workshop? If it's you, you can indeed see that scene. The existence of Zhuge Kongming was not a secret to Leonidas I. When Gilgamesh summoned again and selected many servants to carry out the decapitation plan, Leonidas I, who was burning with passion, also wanted to participate. This kind of suicidal behavior was similar to Leonidas I leading 300 people to fight against the Persian army. It could be said that it was the most exciting thing to arouse Leonidas I's passion. In the end, he was stopped by Zhuge Kongming, who advised him. Only then did Leonidas I settle down. After all, as a defensive talent who led a mere 300 people to delay the Persian army until the allies retreated, how could he be a suicide squad? The most important thing to highlight Leonidas I's value was the defense against the demonic beasts in the north wall. And Leonidas I did not disappoint everyone's expectations of him, and he did not disappoint himself. He successfully led the humans to resist the attack of the demonic beasts for half a year. However, this time it's really a total attack of the demonic beasts. Leonidas I's face, which could not be seen by others because of the helmet, showed a trace of relief. He also guessed that this would be the result. As a soldier, a king, Leonidas I had been collecting information from Uruk, and he was also aware of the turmoil in the southwest and northeast. The attacks of the demonic beasts in both places ended in failure. Perhaps the only choice was to gather the demonic beasts to attack the north wall. If this dragged on, it would indeed have a negative impact on the demonic beasts. Not only that, just now, we received news that the territory of the Quetzalcoatl has also suffered a fierce attack from the demonic beasts. Chaldea's group has been sent by King Gilgamesh to support them. Could it be? Leonidas I seemed to have thought of something, and his voice became surprised. It's probably as you think. The demonic beasts are preparing to attack the humans from all directions, and at the same time, eliminate the Quetzalcoatl. To be able to attack the remaining humans in Mesopotamia from the north and south, and also prepare to eliminate the pillar goddess of the three goddesses alliance, the other party must have sufficient confidence to do so. In this way, the number of demonic beasts was probably unimaginable. This is really crazy. Leonidas gasped. But isn't this also the beginning of our counterattack? If the demonic beasts were to attack in full force, the remaining 5 demonic beast commanders would definitely appear. After all, the battlefield was split into the southern forest and the north wall. If it was really a general attack, there was a high chance that Gorgon would appear. If Wu Ming and the others took the opportunity to eliminate Gorgon, who had Tiamat's authority, then the humans in Mesopotamia would be able to overcome this crisis. Among the three goddesses alliance, the Quetzalcoatl was the most rebellious and stood on the side of the humans. The underworld goddess Ereshkigal could not leave the underworld. More importantly, Ereshkigal's attitude towards the humans was similar to that of the Quetzalcoatl. Although they had only met once, Wu Ming's intuition told him that Ereshkigal was a goddess who wanted to help the humans. It was probably like how the Quetzalcoatl was preparing to use her own methods to save the humans. Therefore, as long as the demonic beasts and the goddess of demonic beasts were eliminated, then they could deal with Ereshkigal, who was thinking for the humans. At that time, when she found out that 2 of the 3 goddesses had been defeated by the humans, and she became a threat to the humans in Mesopotamia, Ereshkigal would probably give up on being the enemy of the humans. Because there were enemies that threatened the humans, Ereshkigal would provide special assistance to the humans. But if one day, all the enemies that threatened the humans disappeared, and her special method of assistance became the last enemy that threatened the humans, was there a need to continue? With Ereshkigal's dignified personality, she would probably stop. Therefore, it was not a bad idea to wipe out the forces of the magical beast goddess that had come out in full force. While thinking, Wu Ming said, "That's why Gilgamesh sent me to the north wall." As for whether it was Gilgamesh's idea, it didn't matter. Anyway, Gilgamesh would definitely allow Wu Ming to act on his own. So that's how it is. Leonidas I also understood what Wu Ming meant. This was indeed a good way to deal with the goddess of magical beasts, and it was to deal with her in one go. But you have to be prepared, because I'm the only one who can support the north wall. These words surprised Leonidas I again. Northwest is a Bif mountain, the territory of the mistress of the heavens, goddess Ishtar. There was a big change in that direction before. It should be because you and Ishtar fought. I heard that goddess Ishtar has been subdued by you. Can't she come to support you? Probably because of the existence of the feathered serpent god, the accelerated tunnel, and other convenient means of communication, Leonidas I had already received the news that Uruk Hyunryong has subdued the mistress of the heavens, goddess Ishtar. Wuming didn't mean to hide it, and since Leonidas I also knew about this, then Wuming had to inform Leonidas I about the specific situation. Indeed, as you received the news, goddess Ishtar is now on our side, but she's not free. When I was flying in the sky just now, I sent her a message. I asked her to support other places. Is it the territory of the southern feathered serpent god? Isn't there already support from Chaldea there? Leonidas I was quite puzzled. Although the enemy was divided into two parts to attack, the north wall was much more dangerous and important than the forest of the feathered serpent god. Leonidas I didn't understand. How could Wuming ignore the overall situation? However, the truth was not what Leonidas I thought. I didn't ask her to support the feathered serpent god. Then Wuming looked to the southeast. I asked her to go to the Persian Gulf. Southeast, near the Persian Gulf. Ishtar was flying on Anna, who was sitting on the sky ship, toward the Persian Gulf with a look of displeasure. Damn Hyunryong, is he really going to squeeze me to the extreme? Ishtar was quite angry at the moment. Ishtar was flying freely in the sky before, fully relieving the anger she suffered from Gilgamesh. However, just now, Wuming used the connection between the two sides after signing the contract to give Ishtar an order. Wuming's order was like this. Go to the Persian Gulf to investigate. If you encounter demonic beasts, stop them and don't let them come ashore. However, Ishtar scoffed. At most, there are some kururu that accidentally flowed here along the Euphrates River and the Tigris River. Not to mention that these demonic beasts can't set off a storm. Moreover, kururu can only move in the water. Ishtar stopped and looked at the Persian Gulf below, full of resentment. In the end, because it's related to demonic beasts, I can't refuse that bastard's order. So Ishtar, who didn't know that there was an emergency in the north wall in the south jungle, thought that we were playing tricks on her. She came to the Persian Gulf with grief and helplessness in her heart. There are no demonic beasts here. Not to mention the demonic beasts that can go ashore, the kururu in the water almost disappeared during this time. Ishtar patrolled the waters of the Persian Gulf, ignoring the kneeling humans on the ground, and ended the patrol. There are no demonic beasts at all, let's go. At the moment, Ishtar wanted to leave here and find a family with a lot of gemstones to do a good deal to ease her current bad mood. However, at this moment, there was a sudden magical reaction under the water of the Persian Gulf. Ishtar noticed it in an instant, but then, her eyes widened. At this moment, Ishtar also understood that Wuming was not playing tricks on her. Demonic beasts really appeared in the Persian Gulf. And the number was extremely shocking. Chapter 952. This magic? How many magical beasts are there? Feeling the rapid emergence of a large amount of magic in the Persian Gulf, Ishtar's voice could not help but tremble. The magic emitted by each magical beast was not amazing. What shocked Ishtar was the number of magical beasts emitting magic. Ants were not terrible, but if there were a large number of ants, they could bite an elephant to death. However, not to mention biting an elephant to death, if there were enough ants, they could drown an elephant just by relying on their numbers. The amazing magic that emerged from the Persian Gulf was caused by the convergence of a large number of magical beasts. Because of the large number of magical beasts emitting magic, the surface of the Persian Gulf even became a little turbulent, like the coast was about to be hit by a storm. The people at the Persian Gulf Observatory also noticed the turbulence in the Persian Gulf and went to the seaside to check the situation. However, they saw a figure emerge from the Persian Gulf. There are humans in the sea? Looking at the figure, it seemed to be a woman. The people who saw this scene were shocked. They thought that someone had fallen into the water and immediately prepared to save the person who had fallen into the water. However, before they could act, one figure after another emerged from the water, and the strange thing was that these figures all looked the same. This strange scene made the people standing by the sea fall into silence, as if they could not react. No. That's the magical beast Kururu? It was unknown who suddenly said this, but the silence turned into panic before anyone could react. Everyone looked again. The figures in the water were not people who had fallen into the water. They were clearly ugly magical beasts with the lower body of a fish and the upper body of a human. After all, even if there was only one magical beast, it was extremely fatal to non-combatants like them, Not to mention that there was more than one here. Don't panic. I remember King Gilgamesh said that this magical beast called Kururu can only move in the water. There is no example of it going ashore. Although this person's voice was quite panicked, it reminded everyone. There weren't many mass-produced magical beasts in Kururu that entered the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. After Gilgamesh sent people to clean them up for a few days, these magical beasts basically disappeared from the Persian Gulf. Although there might have been some lucky survivors, the people here had never encountered them again. It was true that he hadn't encountered any before, but it wasn't a good thing to encounter such a large number of magical beasts. Fortunately, the magical beasts they encountered were Kururu and couldn't go ashore. Otherwise, they would be in danger. Thinking of this, the surrounding people gradually calmed down, and even bravely observed the large number of Kururu in the water. Some of them only had a little contact with this kind of magical beast, and some didn't even have the slightest contact with it. Humans were always curious about the unknown, which led to the next scene. Although this magical beast looks like a human, it is still a little ugly. And it looks like a woman, but it's really not pleasing to the eye. That's right, the other magical beasts are wild beasts, but why do these Kururu look so strange? Probably because they can only live in the water. It didn't matter if they were bold or fearless. In short, because they weren't threatened by the life-threatening danger, they all began to criticize Kurulu. Ishtar, who was flying in the sky, saw the behavior of these humans, and Ishtar commented on it. These fools. It was normal for humans to not know about magical beasts, but as a member of the gods, Ishtar knew about them. Although Ishtar had never seen this kind of magical beast, from the past rumors, Ishtar knew that these magical beasts didn't only live in the water. After all, they were also known as the winged mermaid. As the name implied, they had wings. Poochie. As if something had broken out of its body, a pair of large wings grew out of the back of a Kururu. Then, the wings on the back of the Kururu flapped slowly, bringing the Kururu into the air. The tail of its lower body was still flapping subconsciously, as if it was a little uncomfortable. Then, one by one, the Kururu came out of the back of a large number of Kururu, and a pair of wings grew out of the back of a large number of Kururu, bringing countless of them into the sky together. The magical beasts, Kururu, also known as the winged mermaid, all flew into the sky while the nearby humans were in a daze. It's over. It was unknown who said this, but the atmosphere of despair spread among the crowd. Facing the magical beasts, Kururu that could fly out of the water and into the sky, there was only one outcome for these non-combatants, and that was death. Some people even sat on the ground as if they had completely given up, quietly waiting for the arrival of death. At this moment, a voice like the cry of the goddess of victory sounded in everyone's ears. Angal ta Kaigal Shi, mountain-shaking star salary. A dazzling light comparable to Venus directly hit the group of Kururu magical beasts in the sky, and an explosion occurred suddenly. Boom! The light covered everyone's eyes, and in the next second, the crowd screamed in panic. Wah! Due to the airflow caused by the explosion, the people were scared shitless. But fortunately, no one was in life-threatening danger. The wind and waves soon subsided, and when people looked up to check the situation, they saw the goddess of Venus. Mistress of the heavens? It's Lady Ishtar? It's Lady Ishtar, the goddess who often plunder my family's gems? Lady Ishtar saved us? Ignoring some of the strange sentences, Ishtar's ears were filled with the cheers of the humans for her. After seeing the goddess, the people no longer panicked, not only because Ishtar saved them, but also because the humans' dependence on the goddess had an important impact on them. Tell everyone nearby to retreat and report the situation here to the Uruk. I'll hold off the magical beasts here for the time being. Ishtar was like a heroine, valiantly giving orders to the people. Yes, Lady Ishtar. We'll follow your orders. After kneeling and thanking Ishtar, the people quickly left the area, called the nearby humans, and moved toward the Uruk. Chapter 953. At this moment, Ishtar, who noticed that everyone had left, was elated. Yes, I've wanted to say this for a long time. Acting cool is indeed the best. My prestige has been spread once again. At this moment, Ishtar seemed a little unreliable. However, Ishtar was not arrogant enough to think that she could eliminate all the demonic beasts in the Persian Gulf with a reduced version of her relic. Ishtar turned her head to look at the Persian Gulf. The smoke from the explosion gradually dispersed. As expected, there were still many kururu in the sky above the Persian Gulf. These were not the kururu that Ishtar had hit. Those kururu that were hit by Ishtar had fallen into the water. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. These were the kururu that took the opportunity to fly up after the explosion. Hiss! The kururu, who were obviously mermaids, made a snake-like sound and rushed towards Ishtar. Whoosh! A ray of light shot out from the launch port of Tianzhou's horse Anna and directly hit the kururu at the front. The power of the light directly blew the kururu into pieces and even affected the surrounding kururu. Ishtar kept his left arm pointing straight forward and his right hand under his left elbow. A smile appeared on his face. It was a beautiful smile full of confidence. Anyone who saw this scene would be captivated by Ishtar's smile at this moment. Unfortunately, only the unromantic and extremely ugly kururu could see this scene. Demonic beasts were originally beasts. Since they were beasts, they should appear in the form of beasts. However, these mermaids had a similar body shape to humans. To put it simply, they were demonic beasts that had the appearance of humans. This caused these mermaids to look extremely ugly. Their long cheeks spread out from both sides of their faces and their mouths were filled with shark-like teeth. Their heads, shoulders, arms, elbows, and spines were filled with a single saw-like fin. It was as if they were born to kill. Even the webbing between their claws had become extremely sharp and could be used as thin and transparent blades. What looked like a female's chest was actually two lumps of pectoral fins that were curled together. There was also a tail that was like a cape on its waist. Further down, its lower body was completely a thick fish tail. Its skin was covered with greenish-brown scales. Its blood-red eyes were filled with killing intent and hatred towards humans. This was the same gaze as other demonic beasts. Although I was forced by that bastard Hyunryong, since I'm here, I naturally have no reason to let you go. Be prepared. In the next second, countless rays of light like curved bullets flew towards the group of kururu demonic beasts that were rushing towards Ishtar. An explosion suddenly occurred. However, Ishtar, who was bombarding the winged kururu in the sky, did not notice that in the depths of the Persian Gulf, there was a scarlet eye that was different from the other kururu demonic beasts. It was quietly watching this scene. On the north wall, Leonidas had also finished listening to Wu Ming's explanation. I see. You thought that demonic beasts would appear in the Persian Gulf, so you sent Lady Ishtar there. This was indeed possible. Leonidas might not know, but Wu Ming had already learned the intentions of the demonic beasts from Merlin. They were preparing to attack the Uruk from all directions. The demonic beasts' commanders did not know that Merlin had used Ulidim as a tool to collect information, so their plan was likely to proceed as usual. Although there was a defense in the Persian Gulf, the defense there was basically prepared to deal with the kururu that might exist in the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The Persian Gulf in the southeast could be said to be safer than the North Wall, the South Jungle, the Western Mountains, and even the Northeastern Mountains. After all, it was adjacent to the Indian Ocean, and the demonic beasts could not pass through the surrounding areas to reach there. The only danger was the kururu that came from the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. However, the kururu could not go ashore. In a sense, this was not a danger in the case of proper defense. Not to mention, Gilgamesh had sent people to hunt down the kururu in the river and the Persian Gulf. Although Gilgamesh knew that there were kururu demonic beasts in the river and the Persian Gulf, he had no way to deal with them. After all, as long as the kururu escaped to the bottom of the river or sneaked into the Persian Gulf, humans would not be able to do anything to these demonic beasts. However, with Zhuge Kongming's stone formation covering most of the Uruk, there would be no new kururu entering the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Therefore, as long as the river was well defended and targeted at the remaining kururu in the Persian Gulf, the area around the Persian Gulf was basically safer than the Uruk. No matter how one looked at it, it was foolproof. However, Wu Ming did not think so. Now, there was no place that was absolutely safe in the Uruk. The safer the place, the more likely it was to be dangerous. The Uruk was in the center, but it was still attacked by one of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao. The Persian Gulf was only far from the North Wall, so it could not be classified as safe. Therefore, Wu Ming asked Ishtar to go to the Persian Gulf to see the situation. If there were no demonic beasts, Ishtar would directly come to the North Wall for support. However, if there were demonic beasts, Ishtar would be responsible for eliminating them. With the Bull of Heaven, Ishtar would not be afraid even if she faced a demonic beast commander. No, meeting a demonic beast commander was what Wu Ming wanted. Because this way, he could take advantage of this opportunity to eliminate another demonic beast commander. But this is also good. If there are demonic beasts there and no one to deal with them, the Uruk and even the entire Mesopotamia may be completely finished. If a large number of demonic beasts or even demonic beast commanders appeared in the Persian Gulf, whether it was the North Wall or the Quetzalcoatl in the southern jungle, they would not be able to provide support to the Persian Gulf. Needless to say, the southern jungle would have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. As for the North Wall, they would probably have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. For the same reason, there would be no way to send reinforcements. Just as Leonidas was sighing, Wu Ming noticed that Ishtar's magical power was being drained by a large amount from the contract he signed with Ishtar. It seemed that Wu Ming was right. Demonic beasts had appeared in the Persian Gulf, and there were a lot of them. Otherwise, Ishtar would not have to spend so much effort. It seems that Ishtar has already started fighting with the demonic beasts. I can feel that she is using a lot of magical power from the contract. Leonidas could not help but feel excited. It seems that you are right, Sir Hyunryong. But just as Leonidas was in awe again, the ancient clock hanging high up on the northern wall rang out crisp and incessant. Dang, 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 dang. As the clock rang, the soldiers on the north wall who were on alert shouted, "The demonic beasts are coming!" Chapter 954. Sir Hyunryong, I'll take my leave first, Leonidas said in a hurry. Then, 2 streams of mana gathered in Leonidas's hands and turned into a heavy spear and a small metal shield. Leonidas then walked towards the north wall. The sound of the bell was still rippling. The sound of the bell spread from here to the other parts of the north wall. For a time, the people of the north wall were mobilized. Wu Ming flew up into the sky and let Collis project the situation of the north wall in front of him. Wu Ming could now see the situation of the north wall. Wu Ming wanted to see how the humans were relying on the north wall to defend against the magical beasts. Everyone at the north wall moved. The soldiers were fully armed and ready to fight. The logistics personnel stopped what they were doing and put the things in their hands in the corner to avoid affecting the soldiers' movements. Then, the logistics personnel retreated to a safe area. On the north wall, the soldiers were ready with bows and arrows. But for some reason, they were hidden in the battlements of the north wall. On the ground, the experienced soldiers were holding spears and shields. They came to a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall and waited for the arrival of the magical beasts. These barricades were made of thick wood. They were specially placed in front of the north wall to defend against the magical beasts. After all, they couldn't really use the wall to defend against the magical beasts every time they attacked. If the attackers were humans, they wouldn't have to set up a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall. This was because humans weren't like the magical beasts who were full of weapons and full of aggressiveness. If the magical beasts were left alone, they would attack the north wall. The sheer number of magical beasts was enough to cause damage to the north wall that couldn't be repaired in time. Therefore, a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall was set up as a new layer of insurance. The barricade could let the soldiers' spears pass through. If the magical beasts hit the barricade, they would definitely die. Therefore, the magical beasts could only jump over the barricade. Like now. The mass-produced Ulidim and Ujar rushed to the barricade in front of the north wall because of their mobility. The long spears seemed to be waiting for the right moment, and when the magic beasts were about to reach them, they instantly shot out from the gaps in the fence. However, at this moment, the distance between the magic beast and the fence was enough for it to react. The only thing it could do was to jump over the fence that wasn't that high. However, when the magical beast jumped into the air, spears sprang up like bamboo shoots after a rain, and the spears suddenly grew out, and their positions were exactly where the magical beast was falling, sentencing the magical beast to death before it even landed on the ground. This was a tactic used by humans to deal with brainless magical beasts. One after another, the magical beasts repeated the same actions, constantly sending themselves to their deaths. Although the humans were having a harder time, they had the advantage of not suffering any casualties. However, there would always be casualties in war. There was no war without casualties, unless the time was not right. Just like now. A large number of 4-legged lizard-like Musu and Wuxia arrived at the front line. Due to their short legs, they were much slower than Ujar and Ulidim. However, Their bodies were covered in thick scales. They could easily withstand the spears sticking out of the fence and attack the fence. Immediately after, a red, short and thin three-headed snake darted out from Wuxia and Hu Xiao's body, slithering through the gaps in the fence where the humans had placed their spears. Its spring-like body directly bit towards the humans' throats. These short, slender three-headed snakes were none other than the mass-produced magical beasts that had followed the mass-produced magical beasts to attack the temporary stronghold in the northeast, Musu Maf. However, many of the soldiers present had been through hundreds of battles, especially the soldiers at the front. They were all veterans, who had lived for half a year. Although the humans did not come up with an effective plan to deal with Musu Maf, the soldiers had figured out the characteristics of these short and thin Musu Maf. After they were ejected, they would be in a state of pause for a short while, as if the ejection had used up almost all the strength in their short and slender bodies. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the soldiers could use the spears in their hands or the swords at their waists to kill them. However, even an old horse would stumble sometimes. Due to fatigue, distraction, and various other reasons, some of the soldiers did not react in time and were bitten in the throat by the three-headed snakes. They instantly collapsed to the ground as if they had lost all their strength. Blood gushed out like a fountain. But in the next second, the three-headed snakes that had bitten the soldiers were pierced by spears and 3 of their heads were chopped off. This was done by the soldiers behind the soldiers who had fallen to the ground. The soldiers in the second row were all veterans. No one gave any orders. When the soldiers at the front were injured or killed, the soldiers at the back had to replace them. If there were any magical beasts, they had to kill them. This was the result of the tacit understanding between the humans after fighting against the magical beasts for half a year. However, because the number of Musu Mafus was much more than what they had encountered in the past, the soldiers who had never experienced such a situation gradually felt uneasy. More and more soldiers were killed by the Musu Maf sneak attacks. The Musu Maf also became faster and more powerful as they crashed into the fence. Moreover, due to the large number of Musu Maf, the formation of the human soldiers was disrupted. Many of the Uyghurs and Ulidim stepped on the back of the Musu Maf and jumped over the fence to reach the area between the northern wall and the fence. For a moment, the area in front of the northern wall that had been attacked by the magical beasts was filled with such scenes. Looking at this scene, Wu Ming furrowed his brows. However, he did not choose to take action. Instead, he continued to observe the situation quietly. Firstly, the commander of the magical beasts must be somewhere watching this scene. Wu Ming did not need to deal with the magical beasts in front of him. Instead, he needed to deal with the magical beast commanders that could not be replicated and posed a fatal threat to the humans. Secondly, if the humans needed the help of the gods, just because of this level of attack, Wu Ming would be very suspicious of how the northern wall had lasted for half a year. Humans were existences with endless possibilities. How could they be captured just because of an attack of this level? Sure enough, in the next moment, the humans began to counterattack. Bang! 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 3 metallic sounds echoed throughout the northern wall. Wu Ming focused his gaze and saw that it was Leonidas who had climbed up the northern wall and was knocking on his shield. When the soldiers heard the 3 knocks, they didn't hesitate to retreat back into the north wall. Naturally, the magical beasts would not give up such an opportunity and began to pursue. However, in the next second, they were greeted with a rain of arrows. Chapter 955. Countless magical beasts that charged forward were covered by the rain of arrows. The larger Ulidim and Wuxia were covered in arrows and couldn't be more dead. Although Mu Xiao Hu Xiao had scales on its back, it wasn't indestructible. Its eyes, joints, and other weak points were its weak points. Under the rain of arrows, these weak points were naturally hit. The short and thin 3-headed snakes weren't spared either. After being ejected, they temporarily lost their ability to hide and could only wait for death. Only the Musu Mafu that hadn't escaped from Mu Xiao Hu Xiao's scales were lucky enough to escape. However, there were only a few of them left and they couldn't do much. In an instant, the attacking magical beasts were all killed. Wu Ming couldn't help but nod his head at this scene. The rain of arrows was shot by the archers hidden in the battlements of the northern wall. Now, Wu Ming had completely figured out the hidden purpose of those archers. When the magical beasts attacked, the archers hid and didn't come out. It was obvious that their mission was to cover the soldiers who were fighting on the ground. When the soldiers couldn't hold on and retreated, the archers would shoot thousands of arrows and stop the magical beasts. At the same time, they would become the temporary main force and kill all the magical beasts that entered their shooting range. Moreover, because the humans retreated into the northern wall after Leonidas knocked on the shield 3 times, the archers didn't have to worry anymore and directly shot at the magical beasts. However, there were still a large number of magical beasts that flocked towards them from afar as though the rain of arrows was nothing. That was indeed the case. After all, the archers didn't have unlimited arrows. The scene of thousands of arrows being shot at the same time was only because they had enough arrows at the beginning. Gradually, the archers' arrows were used up. As though they had foreseen this scene, more and more magical beasts rushed towards the northern wall. However, Wu Ming saw a few divine power seals, Dinger, on the northern wall moving. It was not the Dinger that Zhuge Kongming had modified. It was just an ordinary Dinger. However, no matter how ordinary the Dinger was, it was still a powerful weapon. As if it was turned on, the Dinger made a clicking sound. The barrel rose and lengthened a lot because of the extension. The sharp cone-shaped muzzle was aimed at the sky at a certain angle. The safety at the back of the barrel was opened, and the Dinger was ready to fire. The archers were still sniping at the small number of magical beasts below the northern wall, while the Dinger was aimed at a large wave of magical beasts not far away. Dinger, fire! Following Leonidas' furious roar, the order to launch the Dinger was transmitted to the person in charge of the launch. In an instant, the rain of light that started from the center of the northern wall flew into the sky. Then, the rain of light, which was free falling due to gravity, directly hit the second wave of magical beasts as if it had predicted the attack. Asterisk boom! Asterisk, although it wasn't as big as the mushroom cloud, it was still a spectacular explosion in the wilderness north of the northern wall. The second wave of magical beasts was almost completely annihilated. Then, several gates on the northern wall were opened again. Many logisticians and even soldiers came out from the gates. The soldiers went straight to the magical beasts that had escaped the net. Wu Ming thought that the logisticians would deal with the few human corpses, but instead, they collected the arrows shot by the archers. I see. This is a very thorough plan and cooperation. Wu Ming nodded and expressed his approval once again. First, the ground troops would contain the magical beasts. Then the magical beasts would retreat when they broke through. Then, the long-range troops would harvest the nearby magical beasts. Finally, the Dinger would be used to finish off the magical beasts. Then, the Dinger would be used to send people to collect the arrows while the magical beasts couldn't rush over. It had to be said that this was a complete and extremely effective plan. A large number of magical beasts had been killed or injured, and although the human side had also sacrificed themselves, in terms of numbers, even if they could not be compared to the magical beasts, it was still an extremely small number. Before the next wave of magical beasts arrived, Wu Ming flew to the top of the wall and found Leonidas. Very good defense, Leonidas. I even suspect that if the hot spring gate had given you a more suitable geographical location, you would have been able to stop the Persian army with only 30 people. You're exaggerating, Sir Hyun-ryong. Leonidas knew that Wu Ming was just being polite. After all, Leonidas didn't think that he could stop the Persian army with only 30 people. When he tried to stop the Persian army with only 300 people, he also didn't have the confidence. But now, Sage King Gilgamesh provided Leonidas with excellent geographical and human conditions. Whether it was the North Wall or the Uruk soldiers, they played a key role in protecting the North Wall from being breached for half a year. It was like a big gear and a small gear that played a key role. And Leonidas was just the oil between the gears. By the way, what's so special about those arrows? Wu Ming suddenly asked. Sure enough, you found it. Leonidas said with relief. How could Wu Ming not find it? He didn't care about the bodies of the dead soldiers but collected the arrows first. Not to mention other things, the North Wall had the support of the Uruk, so how could there be a shortage of arrows? It was really strange. Moreover, even if there was a shortage of arrows, there was no need to be so anxious. It was obvious that he had overdone it. Unless there was a special effect on those arrows. Previously, when thousands of arrows were shot, the magic beasts were easily killed. Although they still couldn't hurt Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, who were covered in scales, the dense arrows were still able to hurt them. Their eyes, joints and other fragile parts of their bodies were still damaged. Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao were also enhanced magic beasts, so they were easily killed. Therefore, there was an 80% to 90% chance that there was a problem with those arrows. As expected of Lord Sage Dragon. It's just as I've guessed. These arrows are special. They've all been enchanted by Lord Strategist. They're special arrows that are effective against magic beasts. The magic beasts had been enhanced 3 months ago. When facing magic beasts like Mu Xiao, Hu Xiao and Wugger, ordinary arrows couldn't completely pierce their bodies. If the arrows were ineffective, it meant that humans would lose their long-range attacks. Without long-range attacks, it would be impossible for humans to compete with the beasts. At that time, the military counselor knew about this and began to modify the arrows. Chapter 956. Since he still had some free time, Leonida started explaining to Wu Ming. However, the ordinary arrows used by the soldiers have to be modified into enchanted arrows that can pierce through the beasts. It's troublesome and the cost isn't low. So the military advisor gave up on the idea of time-consuming and laborious. Instead, he enchanted the arrows to achieve the effect of piercing through the beasts. As long as the arrows could pierce through the beasts, then everything would be fine. As for the problem of not dealing enough damage, Leonida didn't think about it. After all, the soldiers relied on quantity to shoot arrows. As long as they could break through the defense of the demonic beasts and pierce the arrows into their bodies, then everything would be fine. The current scene was the best proof of that. Once again, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming with new eyes. Sure enough, Zhuge Kongming didn't stay idle after being summoned. He did a lot of things. However, even if it's just a light enchantment on the arrows, it's still not a small task for the military counselor. Although the military counselor modifies some of the arrows every day, in order to avoid wastage, we always collect the arrows after fighting against the magical beasts. In any case, the demonic beasts would not react to the arrows. They would neither attack nor use the arrows. Therefore, every time the demonic beasts attacked, the logisticians would retrieve the arrows while the soldiers would rest. After all, fighting against the demonic beasts would cause a lot of physical and mental fatigue. But when the number of beasts was too high, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would be needed. When the number of beasts was too high, the soldiers would listen to Leonida's orders and return to the north wall. Afterwards, the soldiers on the north wall would use the seal of divinity, Dinger, to aim at the beasts in the distance and bombard them. As for the nearby magical beasts, they were left to the archers to deal with. Alternatively, they would send melee soldiers to attack them in groups, relying on numbers to kill a single magical beast nearby. It was ironic that the beasts who had the advantage in numbers were killed by the humans. After that, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would block the beasts and create a gap in their attacks. The logistics personnel and soldiers had the opportunity to collect the arrows. At the beginning of the implementation of this strategy, the humans frequently made mistakes. After all, there were a lot of uncertainties in the strategy. For example, the speed of the beasts, where the seal of divinity, Dinger, shells should be fired to effectively block the beast's movement. There was also a series of problems that the logistics personnel couldn't efficiently collect the arrows due to the high frequency of the beast's attacks. In the end, Zhuge Kongming, as the military advisor, and Leonidas, who was in charge of the front lines, came up with an effective plan. Gilgamesh looked at it and made some changes, and this set of plans to deal with the magical beasts was settled. Moreover, because the logisticians had a recycling tool that King Gilgamesh had given them from his own treasury, the speed at which they collected the arrows wasn't slow. After Gilgamesh saw the report, he took the initiative to give the logistics personnel the tools that had the effect of collecting the arrows from his treasury. Although it's not as efficient as this king's treasury, these tools are enough for you. It will probably increase your efficiency by a few times. Go and fight the beasts for this king with gratitude. These were Gilgamesh's original words. However, the morale of the soldiers rose one by one. It had to be said that after Gilgamesh gave the tools from his treasury to the front line, it did indeed increase the efficiency of the logistics personnel in collecting the arrows. This was much more reliable than simply using the treasures as artillery shells. Standing on the north wall, Wu Ming looked outside. Sure enough, the logistics personnel without weapons were all carrying square boxes. They were quickly moving between the piles of arrows and the corpses of the beasts on the ground. Whenever the logistics personnel who were collecting the arrows got close to the piles of arrows, the arrows on the ground and the corpses of the beasts would automatically be collected into the boxes on their backs. There are some good things in Gilgamesh's treasury. No wonder Ishtar has been coveting it. Wu Ming didn't know what was in Gilgamesh's treasury. After all, The treasury didn't belong to him. He didn't need to care about what was in it. But now that he looked at it, there were some useful things in Gilgamesh's treasury. Now that he thought about it, Wuming regretted that he didn't take anything from Gilgamesh's treasury when he left Uruk. The items in his dragon's nest dimension were almost used up. The number of tools that he took from Nasrik's treasury had also decreased to the point where he could see them all at a glance. Last time, he didn't take anything from Gil. This time, should he take something from Gil? Wuming was a little conflicted. But he had to wait until everything was over before thinking about it. Right now, he had to focus on the beasts. Bang! 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 Another 3 metal collision sounds were heard. This time, Wuming could hear it clearly. Because the one who made the sound was Leonidas, who was standing beside Wuming. As if it was a signal, the soldiers and logistics personnel outside the north wall stopped their movements. They didn't care about the enchanted arrows on the ground or the corpses of the beasts. They turned and retreated towards the north wall. Because the beasts were coming again. The smoke caused by the dinger gradually dissipated. Countless beasts were rushing towards the north wall. The number of beasts was several times more than the total number of beasts that attacked before. Looking at this scene, Wuming couldn't help but frown. This wasn't a good sign. The attack of the magical beasts this time, regardless of whether it was the frequency or the number, made Wuming shocked. There were still a lot of enchanted arrows outside the north wall. If the beasts attacked like this every time, then it was only a matter of time before the north wall was broken. But if there was a beast commander, then the north wall would be broken in an instant. Seeing so many magical beasts, Leonidas decided not to let the soldiers shoot at them with their arrows. Dinger ready! He directly ordered the soldiers to use the dinger. It was simple and crude. Fire! Along with Leonidas' order, dozens of dinger on the north wall once again fired bullets filled with magic power. Boom! 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 One after another, explosions broke out in the field outside the north wall. Because of the explosions, a cloud appeared in the eyes of the people on the north wall. This was a scene full of art, if one ignored the beasts. Chapter 957. Leonidas and Wuming walked down the north wall. The demons had been bombarded by the dinger on the north wall, so they had retreated and stopped attacking. After all, the dinger was a real mystical weapon. Even if the demons were strengthened, they would not be able to withstand it unless the demon's commander came in person. Because of this, the soldiers were able to rest for a while. Wuming and Leonida also had the opportunity to retreat from the north wall. This was because Wuming had something to discuss with Leonida. In Leonida's tent, Leonida sat on his own seat while Wuming sat on the seat next to him. The seating arrangement was requested by Wuming. He didn't put on airs, so Leonida could sit wherever he wanted. Leonidas, who had already taken off his helmet, revealed a resolute face. With his red hair, he indeed looked like a Spartan. Leonida picked up the clay jug next to him and aimed it at his mouth. He gulped down the water inside and let out a heroic sound that would make people with OCD feel very comfortable. Ah! Awesome! Leonidas slammed the clay jug on the table in front of him. He looked like he was drunk as he looked at Wuming. So, Hyunryong-sama, why are you looking for me alone? Leonida's voice was full of drunkenness. This gave Wuming the feeling that Leonida was really drunk. Mesopotamia was famous for ale. When Wuming first came to the Uruk, he was worshipped with ale. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad either. It was just average. But as long as it was wine, it could make people drunk. Even dead spirits could get drunk. Even their avatars could get drunk. To be honest, if Wuming didn't know that there was no wine in the north wall, Wuming would have thought that Leonida was drinking in the barracks. Rumor had it that Leonidas could get drunk with just a drop of alcohol and go on a drunken rampage. Cough cough. At this moment, Wuming also became serious. I'm going to Nippur. When Wuming said this, the slightly drunk Leonida's face was no longer red. His expression also became serious. He took the clay jug off the table and put it aside. Leonida put his hands on the small table in front of him and looked at Wuming with a serious expression. Is that the gathering place of the magical beasts? Although it was in the form of a question, his tone was a statement. After all, Wuming had told him this information when he came to the north wall. After that, without waiting for Wuming to answer him, Leonidas once again fell into a drunken stupor and started talking to himself. About 3 months ago, when the magical beast commander appeared with the strengthened magical beasts, the north wall had already been built. Outside the north wall, there were still a lot of people left in Nippur. They were all trying to resist the magical beasts. In order to survive, they were full of hope and were waiting for our rescue. Leonida grabbed the clay jug that was just put down next to him. He took a big gulp of water and continued to speak. As a result, on the night of the appearance of the magical beast commander, the Uruk was attacked. Since then, we haven't received any news from Nippur. It was obvious that the city gates of Nippur had been broken open by the strengthened demons and their demons commander, and had fallen completely. A mere city was not enough in front of the magical beast commander. Nippur was outside the north wall. If it was the current magical beasts, it would be difficult for them to resist, not to mention the existence of the magical beast commander. Wu-Ming didn't have the intention to talk about this topic. He just quietly listened to Leonida's narration. When Leonida was almost done, Wu-Ming began to talk. I don't know if there are other places that have become the strongholds of the magical beasts other than Nippur. I'm going to go outside the north wall to check if there are any living humans and destroy the magical beast's lair. Wu-Ming's last words could be considered as a response to Leonida's condolences for Nippur. Is that so? Although Leonidas thought that this method was dangerous, he didn't say anything. Wu-Ming only came to inform Leonidas about it. After all, Wu-Ming was not his subordinate at all. The two of them were not even on the same level. Leonida's status in Mesopotamia was much lower than Wu-Ming's. After all, Wu-Ming was the Hyunryong of Mesopotamia. Don't worry, I'm also a god-level servant. If I can't beat them, I can still run. If it were you, I'm afraid you would be buried in the magical beasts. Wu-Ming's comforting words were like sarcasm, causing Leonidas's Spartan face to twitch involuntarily. However, what Wu-Ming said was indeed true. If Wu-Ming was there during the beheading operation, perhaps a few more servants would have survived. In that case, I won't say anything. At that moment, Leonidas stood up and picked up the clay jar on the ground. During the time when you are not in the north wall, I will guard the north wall. With that, Leonidas boldly drank the entire jar of water. This made Wu-Ming feel rather helpless, but Wu-Ming had to do something right now, didn't he? Then I'll leave it to you, General Leonida. Wu-Ming picked up a bottle of water beside him and drank it without hesitation. He was no weaker than Leonidas. Then I'll leave first. Putting down the clay jar in his hand, Wu-Ming did not say goodbye to Leonida and went straight out of the tent. When Leonida rushed out, he found that he couldn't find Wu-Ming. At this moment, in the sky outside the north wall, Wu-Ming, who relied on telekinesis to fly in the sky, headed in the direction of Nippur in his memory. He also asked Kalas to help him detect the movements of the demonic beasts so that he could avoid them and go directly to Nippur. If it was only to detect the magic reaction on the surrounding ground, Kalas could do it. Although Wu-Ming and Leonida said that they were going to see if there were any living people around, in fact, the hope of living people was directly impossible. This point, whether it was Leonida or Wu-Ming, they were very clear about. However, seeing through but not saying it out was more or less the same meaning. When the time comes, I will directly kill all the demonic beasts. It can be regarded as revenge for the people in Nippur, and even the entire Mesopotamia who were sacrificed by the demonic beasts. With this in mind, Wu-Ming accelerated again, and soon Wu-Ming saw the shadow of Nippur. Before directly approaching Nippur, Wu-Ming smelled the stench of demonic beasts and the demonic beasts that were active in Nippur. From the sky, Wu-Ming could faintly see that there were red marks on the ground and walls of Nippur, and there were a lot of them. It was blood. Sure enough, it's better to directly destroy Nippur. As a god, he should also do something that was in line with God, destroying a city. Chapter 958. Wu-Ming didn't have any hope for the survivors, that was for sure. But what was contradictory was that Wu-Ming still had hope for the survivors. A certain righteous hero once said that when people say, impossible, there must be a glimmer of hope in their hearts. Although Wu-Ming wasn't human, he also had the same thought. So when Wu-Ming saw the scene in Nippur, Wu-Ming was filled with anger. There were too many red bloodstains around Nippur city, so much that it was enough to prove that there were no living people in Nippur city. Moreover, These bloodstains all indicated that what the citizens of Nippur City had experienced was a terrifying massacre brought about by magical beasts. So Wu Ming didn't want to go down to investigate the situation. Instead, he prepared to launch an attack. When the hope in a person's heart was destroyed, who wouldn't be angry? Wu Ming would be angry, but it was useless. Annihilating Nippur was the only way to save Nippur. Wu Ming believed that if the patron saint of Nippur, Enlil, was here, he would agree with Wu Ming's idea. Wu Ming waved his hand, and golden ripples suddenly emerged from Wu Ming's side. A bright white holy spear was spat out from it. This was the holy spear that Wu Ming had obtained in the country of shadows. It was made from the core branch of the world tree. Although it wasn't comparable to King Arthur's holy spear, Luin Gomanyad, it represented a part of the Nordic world tree, so its status wasn't low. Although it had merged and separated from Fan Baba, this spear had gone through the baptism of its origin with Wu Ming. It was no longer the same as before. Holding Yggdrasil in a reverse grip, Wu Ming raised it behind his back and pointed the tip of the spear at Nippur City diagonally below. Wu Ming began to instill magic into Yggdrasil. Wu Ming was ready to destroy Nippur completely with one attack. Collis, correct the target and gather the mana. Yes, Master. Under Wu Ming's command, Collis, who was in a supporting magic attire, left. A few magic arrays suddenly appeared around Wu Ming and slowly gathered on Yggdrasil. The magic array could allow Wu Ming to aim at the center of Nippur more accurately. It could also gather Wu Ming's mana to prevent the mana from leaking midway, making Yggdrasil more powerful. Noble Fantas dash in an instant. The mana in Wu Ming's body surged like a boiling ocean. Countless mana materialized and gathered on Yggdrasil in Wu Ming's hand like a decorative ribbon dancing on the spear's body. Liberated dash. Yggdrasil seemed to have been stimulated. The shape of the tip and the end of the spear changed. Not only did it become longer and thicker, but it also became more sacred. Diagonally below, the magical beasts in Nippur, whether indoors or outdoors, all raised their heads in horror and looked in the direction of the huge mana in the sky. Their beastly instincts told them that they would probably die soon, the kind where not even dregs would be left. Yggdrasil! Wu Ming's eyes suddenly turned golden, and he threw Yggdrasil like a javelin. Wu Ming himself rose a lot because of the strong impact of Yggdrasil. The body of the Yggdrasil spear was surrounded by several auxiliary magic arrays. The colorful ribbons formed by magic power fluttered behind the end of the Yggdrasil spear. It was like a beautiful comet that was about to fall to the ground, and flew straight towards Nippur. As long as one had a discerning eye, they would be able to tell that this comet was flying towards the city center of Nippur. It seemed like it was going to hit the center of Nippur and destroy Nippur. Roar! Countless magical beasts reacted and immediately began to run for their lives. They roared in fear as if they were panicking like the citizens of Nippur. However, the comet did not have any compassion for the magical beasts and still brought God's punishment over. At this moment, the ground shook. 10 huge ferocious snake heads suddenly broke out of the ground and aimed at the comet, formed by Yggdrasil. These 10 snake heads shot out purple rays. In the southwest of Mesopotamia, in the tropical rainforest formed by the authority of the feathered god, countless red magical beasts rioted in the rainforest. The magical beasts shuttled through the rainforest and constantly rubbed against the vegetation of the rainforest, causing the rainforest to rustle as if a storm was coming. Roar! These magical beasts were covered with thick and short red hair. They had no eyes, and there was some tumor-like hair, where the eyes were and the back of their heads. Their tails were raised high as if they relied on their tails to search for enemies. The teeth of these magical beasts were not sharp. It was enough to tell that they did not use their teeth to bite their prey. Instead, they used their thick claws to tear their enemies apart. There were traces of flames on their claws, as if they were about to burn. This was the magical beast Uxiu-Mugil. It was a type of magical beast that was different from Ugiel and Ulidim. However, Uxiu-Mugil was not the only magical beast in the rainforest. There were also some carnivorous orcs with leopard heads, wolf heads, and dog heads. Roar! The orcs wielded weapons like clubs and fought fearlessly against the magical beasts that swarmed in. Although they were not as large as the strengthened magical beasts, this rainforest was their territory. They were more familiar with this place than the magical beasts. Using the geographical advantage, the orcs were able to hold their ground. They were evenly matched with the magical beasts. However, even with the perfect geographical advantage, they still couldn't beat the human advantage. Although the orcs relied on their familiarity with the terrain to contend with the magical beasts, there were simply too many magical beasts, which caused the orcs to keep retreating. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before the orcs were forced to retreat to a dead end. Of course, there was another possibility, and that was if the magical beast commander personally took action. That would be much faster. Like now. Roar, roar, roar. A roar that was even more majestic than the roar of ordinary magic beasts came from afar. The orcs could only see rows of rainforest trees falling one after another. The earth was still shaking as if some terrifying tyrant had rushed to the battlefield. Sure enough, in the next second, a huge Uxiumugle that looked similar to the other Uxiumugle but was so huge that it struck fear in the orcs appeared in front of the orcs. However, there was one difference. This huge Uxiumugle had 3 sharp horns on its head, making the huge Uxiumugle, which looked like a lion, look like a triceratops. The orcs felt the enormous magic power of this gigantic Uxiumughar, and came to a conclusion without a doubt. This was the prototype of the mass-produced Uxiumughar, one of the rare beast-type Uxiumughar commanders. Roar, roar, roar. The prototype Uxiumugle roared again. This roar was mixed with a large amount of mana, and countless orcs who were close by fainted from this roar. Not only that, but the surrounding trees also collapsed one after another, forming an open space full of fallen trees. It made the entire rainforest look much more spacious and bright. Simply put, the roar of the prototype Uxiumugle could be understood as the release of magical power, sound. The roar full of magical power pushed down the orcs and the surrounding trees. Countless Uxiumugle took this opportunity to pass by the orcs and rushed into the depths of the forest. This was the intention of the prototype Uxiumugle. Their enemy was not the orcs, but the commander of the orcs' commanders. That was, the master of this rainforest, the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl. Roar! A roar like that of both a tiger and a leopard came from the depths of the rainforest. Countless magical beasts trembled and froze on the ground after hearing it. This was the innate suppression of wild beasts. The fear of wild beasts meeting more powerful wild beasts was engraved in their DNA. The Uxiumugle knew that the roar came from an existence superior to them, so they did not dare to move forward. It had to be said that this was an interesting matter. No matter what, humans could not stop the attacks of the magical beasts, but a beast that was higher in level than the magical beasts could stop them in their tracks. It could only be said that it was really interesting. The prototype Uxiumugle was not surprised at all. Its big head shook at the surrounding Uxiumugle who had stopped. Although it did not have eyes, it gave people the feeling that it was examining these mass-produced Uxiumugle. Then, the prototype Uxiumugle let out a strange roar, as if it was rather disdainful of these mass-produced magical beasts. After all, this was not the first time it had encountered such a situation. It had led these mass-produced magical beasts to raid the rainforest several times before. Almost every time, these mass-produced Uxiumugle would be frightened by the roar that sounded like both a tiger and a leopard. Although it could force these mass-produced Uxiumugers to move again, as the original Uxiumugers really didn't want to see them in such a useless state anymore. At that moment, it no longer cared about these mass-produced creatures. Anyway, it could deal with the existence that let out that sound like both a tiger and a leopard by itself, so it might as well say that it had fought with the other party several times already. Just as the prototype Uxiumugle was pondering, a yellow-striped humanoid creature suddenly jumped from the trees in the dense forest towards the prototype Uxiumugle. The toy-like claw spear in its hand flashed dangerously as it viciously stabbed at the prototype Uxiumugle. Roar! As the prototype Uxiumugle roared, the claw spear that flashed dangerously did not hit the Uxiumugle's body. Instead, it hit the 3 horns on the Uxiumugle's head. Clang! The sound of clashing steel resounded in the surroundings, causing the mass-produced Uxiumugle, who were originally frightened, to collectively tremble. They slowly and carefully retreated, as if they were giving way to the leopard man and the prototype Uxiumugle to fight. That's right, the one who let out that sound like both a tiger and a leopard was the leopard man, who was dressed strangely and looked like a Kospali. She was also the commander of those orcs, and the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl was her commander. However, the claw spear that was violently rubbing against the 3 horns of the prototype Uxiumugle showed that the leopard man was not just a figurehead. It showed that she had god-level strength, and was comparable to Tiamat's direct descendant, the 11 Sons, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, Wuxia. But at this moment, Wuxia let out a mocking sound, which made the leopard man who was close by rather angry. "Damn it!" The leopard man roared in despair, then immediately used the reaction force of Wuxia to jump back to the rainforest in the distance where there were still trees. Then, the leopard man hung the claw spear in her hand on a book, opened her hands and placed them on her cheeks, and shouted at the sky. "Cooker! I can't beat it! Come and help me!" That's right, the leopard man was actually unable to beat Wuxia. They seemed to be evenly matched, but that was only because Wuxia was not serious. In fact, when Wuming returned, Wuxia had been here for a long time. At that time, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, Ulidum, had actually come to support Wuxia, not to attack. When Wuming and Gudatsi came to the southern jungle, the reason why they did not see Quetzalcoatl was because Quetzalcoatl was busy dealing with Wuxia. The reason why the leopard man, who had led the way for Gudatsi and the others, left after bringing Gudatsi and the others here was because he needed to help Quetzalcoatl deal with Wuxia. As for telling Gudatsi and the others, don't even think about it. Although the leopard man was not stupid, the leopard man's brain circuit was different from ordinary people and even ordinary servants. It was very similar to those berserkers. It was already good enough that she could go back to support Quetzalcoatl. It was basically impossible to expect her to report the information. If Wuming was there at that time, maybe she could ask. Unfortunately, Wuming was not there at that time. When Wuming and Gudatsi met up, the leopard man had already left. Moreover, because Wuxia, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, attacked the southwest part of the jungle, which was quite a distance away from Wuming and Gudatsi. So whether it was Wuming or Chaldea, they did not notice that Wuxia, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, was constantly attacking the jungle. At that time, the information that Merlin had obtained from Ulidum's mind was incomplete. As a result, the original Wuxia, one of the commanders of the magic beasts, had been staying near the southwest part of the southern forest to harass and attack the forest. He had really missed a good opportunity to retreat early. After that, the Wuxia had been attacking the forest intermittently until now. Chapter 959. The original plan of the monster commanders was to let the monster commanders lead an unimaginable number of monsters to attack the Uruk from all directions of Mesopotamia. Ulidum and Wuxia would attack Quetzalcoatl from the southwest, the Kururu would land from the southeast, Musamaf and Ajar would mount a surprise attack from the northwest, and finally, Basumu and the mysterious existence using Enkidu's body would launch a frontal attack from the north. There were a total of 4 directions to encircle the Uruk. This was the plan formulated by the monster commanders after losing 4 monster commanders. The original plan was to use Wuxia and Ulidum, who were responsible for attacking the southwest, to launch an attack on Quetzalcoatl as a fuse to temporarily contain Quetzalcoatl. If possible, they would attract the attention of the Uruk side as much as possible. When the Uruk side's attention was diverted to this side, the other monster commanders would launch a joint attack from the Persian Gulf, Mount Abif, and the north to capture the Uruk in one fell swoop. After that, they would besiege Quetzalcoatl. As a result, Ulidum, who went to the southwest jungle to support Wuxia, was bumped into by Wuming halfway. Moreover, he overestimated himself and wanted to devour Wuming. In the end, he was killed by Wuming and was forced to retreat. In this way, only Wuxia was left as a monster commander in the southwest, and the plan to use him as a fuse to trigger the final battle had to be changed. The monsters had some kind of special connection with each other. If any monster commander died, the other monster commanders could sense it. The reason why the 10 servants in the previous decapitation operation were discovered so quickly was precisely because of this. In short, after Ulidum died, the monsters immediately changed their plan. They let Wuxia continue to contain Quetzalcoatl, and let Musamaf and Ajar's monster army cross the mountains and go straight to the Uruk. At that time, the monsters in the north and the Persian Gulf could still temporarily ignore Quetzalcoatl and take down the Uruk. However, at that time, Musamaf and Ajar encountered Ishtar, who was pulled into the group by Wuming. After being replenished by Wuming's command spell, Ishtar, who was full of resentment, activated her noble phantasm and directly bombarded the monster army to the point that not even ashes were left. The 2 monster commanders, Musamaf and Ajar, also fell into the underworld. In the end, Ujar was killed by the goddess of the underworld, and Musamaf took the opportunity to escape. Quizzard Coyotl, who was located in the jungle, needed to be contained, so even if they couldn't use it as a fuse, it didn't matter. However, if Ujar and Musamaf failed, it would really be a big crisis. Ishtar's golden star explosion penetrated the underworld, and directly became impassable. On the other hand, the monsters in the Persian Gulf were weak, and as a fuse, it seemed a bit unreliable and easy to be targeted by the humans. As a result, after a long time, they could only continue to attack from the north. When the monsters in the north were ready to attack, the monsters in the Persian Gulf also moved at the same time. After all, even if they couldn't surround the Uruk from all directions, attacking the Uruk from the north and the south at the same time was also a good choice. As the saying goes, the worst thing in a team battle is to lose the backline. When the beasts appear in the Persian Gulf, Uruk's side will definitely become anxious, and the whole battle will definitely become advantageous to the beasts. However, Ujar, who was unwilling to be treated as a leftover material, took the initiative to attack the jungle. This attack could be said to be his biggest attack since coming to the jungle in the south. As a beast-shaped magical beast commander, Wuxia Mughals' physique was even stronger than those human-shaped magical beast commanders. This was because Wuxia Mughal had retained the essence of a wild beast. When faced with a hostile human or a beast, which was more terrifying, it was believed that basically everyone would say that the beast was the beast, because the beast's attack was not logical, that is, unexpected. Especially in a battle to the death, the intelligent human would often think of a way out, while the beast would pay attention to what was in front of them. The monster commanders in the human form also had such a drawback. They had the drawbacks that belonged to humans, and not only that. Even though the magical beast commanders were all magical beasts and enemies of humans, once they gained intelligence and had decent intelligence, it was inevitable that they would fall into the same lowly circle as humans, and that was forming cliques. Based on their appearance, the monster commanders were divided into human form and beast form. The humanoid magical beast commander believed that it was different from the mass-produced magical beasts and was superior to them. Moreover, the humanoid magical beast commander was indeed more in line with the term commander, unlike the pure magical beasts that were categorized as wild beasts. On the other hand, the monster commanders in the beast form believed that the beast form was the form of the monster's superior, and they should not be proud of being different from other monsters. Similarly, the monster commanders in the beast form retained the essence of a beast. Compared to a commander, they were more like monsters. It had to be said that this was rather ironic, because it was very much like the so-called pro-emperor faction and pro-people faction. Those humanoid magical beast commanders boasted of their arrogance, and they made up the majority of the 11 magical beast commanders. Add to that the fact that some of the beast-type magical beast commanders didn't do anything, and some even switched sides. It could be said that the humanoid magical beast commanders looked down on beast-type magical beast commanders like Uelidum, and the lion-headed magical beast commander Uelidum was a classic example among classic examples. The kobold Uelidum had overestimated himself and wanted to devour Wuming. The lion-headed Uelidum had also thought that the goddess of the underworld would not be able to do anything to him. But in the end, they had both been killed. Their deaths were caused by the common flaw of the monster commanders in the human form. Wuming's multiple spells did not kill Uelidum, and Ereshkigal also had to expend some effort to kill Uelidum. From this, it could be seen that the two of them were indeed quite capable. If they had been more careful, they might not have left so easily. When they evolved into human form, they also inherited the weaknesses of humans. Arrogance, conceit, self-conceit, thinking that they had done something and so on. And it was precisely these weaknesses that harmed them. Uelidum were the best examples. As for the fact that they looked down on the beast form magical beast commanders, although they didn't show it, all the magical beast commanders were well aware of it. Moreover, the best example was the reason why Wuxia Mughal had brought those brainless mass-produced Wuxia Mughal to the southwest border alone to deal with Quizzard Coyotl. It was obvious that Uelidum had been isolated. Chapter 960. As for the fact that they looked down on the beast-form demonic beast commanders, although they didn't show it, all the demonic beast commanders were well aware of it. Moreover, the reason why Wuxia Mughal alone brought those brainless mass-produced Wuxia Mughal to the southwest border to deal with Quizzard Coyotl was the best example. It was clear that Wuxia Mughal had been isolated. traveling from the northernmost fir forest to the southernmost forest, and being the fuse to launch the attack. This kind of tiring work could only be done by the unpopular beast-form demonic beast commanders. And it just so happened that Wuxia Mughar had the strength and was also a beast-form demonic beast commander. No matter what, he was fully qualified to come to the southwest border. But Wuxia Mughar probably didn't have good intentions for rushing over. The reason why Wuxia Mughar rushed over was probably because he needed to be the supervisor of the beast-form demonic beast commander, just like the combination of Wuxia Mughar and Mughar. However, Mughar was the beast-form demonic beast commander who had switched sides. Although he didn't express it clearly, Muzamaf, who was also a beast-type magical beast commander, had the intention of defecting to the side of the human-type magical beast commander. This made Wuxia Mughal, who had noticed this, feel extremely displeased. This was enough to show that the beast-form demonic beast commander's camp was far inferior to the human-form demonic beast commander's camp. Not only that, the reason why Mughar and Hughar led their mass-produced Mughar and Hughar to raid the Uruk was also because of the instigation, sarcasm, and ridicule of the human-form demonic beast commanders. The main purpose of this matter was to test the fighting strength of the Uruk. Apart from that, it was also to make the beast-form demonic beast commanders sacrifice one of their members, thus weakening the strength of the beast-form demonic beast commanders. Although the beast-form demonic beast commanders, Mughar and Hughar were the first to die, the human-form demonic beast commanders also suffered many casualties. For example, the Scorpion Man Kitabliru and the Bull Kasalik both died in the hands of the servants summoned by the human side, while the Kobold Wuxia Mughar and the Lion Wuxia Mughar were also killed. Currently, there were only 2 human-form demonic beast commanders left. Although the beast-form demonic beast commanders didn't do anything and had the intention of switching sides, even so, the advantage of the beast-form demonic beast commanders was highlighted. Thinking of this, coupled with the current situation of personally participating in the battlefield, Wuxia Mughar felt even more delighted. The human-form demonic beast commanders liked to command, while the beast-form demonic beast commanders preferred to personally participate. Wuxia Mughar and Hughar and Ugar and Wuming's attacks were probing attacks first. Hughar Mughar. If it were Wuxia Mughar, he would definitely choose to ambush and kill Hughar at the right time, unlike Wuxia Mughar. Of course, trash like the orcs in this forest couldn't arouse Wuxia Mughar's interest at all. Only existences like the leopard man could slightly arouse Wuxia Mughar's interest. As for the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, Wuxia Mughar was even more interested in him. Quetzalcoatl was an opponent who was on par with him, or even stronger than him. But this didn't mean that he would be killed in an instant. He had fought with the Quetzalcoatl several times. Although he retreated first every time, he gradually became familiar with Quetzalcoatl's attacking style. The Quetzalcoatl goddess possessed strength that wasn't inferior to the mother goddess. Her fighting style was also as wild as a beast's. But that wasn't important. In short, the wildness of the human body was vividly displayed by the Quetzalcoatl goddess. At this thought, Wuxia Mughar's blood couldn't help but boil. Roar, roar, roar. Wuxia Mughar once again let out a roar filled with magic. This was a declaration of war against the enemy. And the wild-natured Quetzalcoatl goddess Quetzalcoatl naturally couldn't ignore Wuxia Mughar's declaration of war. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. An object that Wuxia Mughar couldn't see clearly spun and whizzed towards Wuxia Mughar. However, Wuxia Mughar didn't need to see it. He had fought with Quetzalcoatl several times before, so even if he couldn't see it, he already knew what it was. It was Quetzalcoatl's weapon. Clang! Wuxia Mughar caught it with the 3 horns on his head and stuck it firmly in the middle of his 3 horns. After all, this was an old opponent, so he wouldn't be hit by this move again. But then, another blurry existence flew over. It was an existence even bigger than the weapon. It was a human figure. It was Quetzalcoatl. Ah! Quetzalcoatl's foot landed hard on Wuxia Mughar's head, and it happened to hit Quetzalcoatl's own weapon. The powerful impact instantly kicked the handle of Quetzalcoatl's weapon, which was stuck between Wuxia Mughar's 3 horns. This kick caused the atmosphere to tremble, and Wuxia Mughar couldn't help but kneel down. Boom! Taking advantage of Wuxia Mughar's temporary powerlessness, Quetzalcoatl instantly picked up her weapon and jumped back to the leopard man's side. Wuxia Mughar slowly stood up from the extremely short period of powerlessness. This bit of damage wasn't enough to cause the slightest bit of damage to his powerful body. Crack. But at this moment, one of the 3 horns on Wuxia Mughar's head made a cracking sound. This stunned Wuxia Mughar. Then, Wuxia Mughar's horn broke and fell to the ground in front of him. After fighting with you so many times, I've more or less figured out your fighting style. Quizzard Colotl said to Wuxia Mughar in a lively and cheerful voice like a big sister next door. Wuxia Mughar and Quizzard Colotl had fought a few times, and similarly, Quizzard Colotl had also fought with Wuxia Mughar before. This was something that anyone could figure out. Since Wuxia Mughar could analyze Quizzard Colotl from these few fights, there was no reason why Quizzard Colotl couldn't analyze Wuxia Mughar, right? And this time, Quizzard Colotl broke Wuxia Mughar's horn because of Quizzard Colotl's analysis of Wuxia Mughar. But this time, Wuxia Mughar was completely furious. Chapter 961. Wuxia Mughar's body was quite tough. No matter how Quizzard Coyotl hammered and wrestled, she could not cause any obvious damage to Wuxia Mughar because his body took all the hits. This was the strength of a demonic beast commander. Their physical fitness was ridiculously high. As a beast-type demonic beast commander, Wuxia Mughar's physical fitness was even higher than that of other humanoid demonic beast commanders. If it had to be expressed in terms of data, Wuxia Mughar's durability might have reached the AX level. However, although Wuxia Mughar could withstand Quizzard Coyotl's attacks, the pain was still transmitted to his mind. Being able to withstand hits did not mean that it did not hurt. These were 2 different things. As one of the 3 goddesses, although Quizzard Coyotl's attacks could not directly cause harm to Wuxia Mughar, who had an extremely high physical fitness, she could indirectly cause harm to him. It was precisely because the indirect damage accumulated to a certain extent that Wuxia Mughar retreated. While Quizzard Coyotl's attacks did not have much effect on Wuxia Mughar, Wuxia Mughar's attacks did not have much effect on Quizzard Coyotl because he really could not catch up to her. Coupled with the terrain of the rainforest and his high agility, Wuxia Mughar, who was constantly under attack, was the first to retreat every time. But both sides could not afford to waste time like this. Whether it was Wuxia Mughar or Quizzard Coyotl, both sides were looking for each other's weaknesses. The first to act was Quizzard Coyotl. Since she could not cause harm to Wuxia Mughar's tough body, she would attack the less tough parts. Quizzard Coyotl aimed at the 3 horns on Wuxia Mughar's head. The 3 horns of Wuxia Mughar, who was known as the Triceratops, were naturally not ordinary horns. Whether it was in terms of sharpness or toughness, they were comparable to the so-called divine weapons, just like Quizzard Coyotl's weapon, Makana. But there was a principle that Wuxia Mughar did not understand, and that was the so-called, overly tough makes it easy to break. Coincidentally, Quizzard Coyotl understood this principle. Quizzard Coyotl used her own weapon, Makana, in combination with her wrestling skills. Through the contrast of using softness to overcome toughness, she successfully kicked one of Wuxia Mughar's horns off. Or rather, it was cut off by the vibration of the saw blade. While Wuxia Mughar was proud of his 3 horns, he also valued them very much. This was just like how many people valued their hairstyle. To Wuxia Mughar, these 3 horns were even more important than a damaged hairstyle. After all, the 3 horns were the proof of Wuxia Mughar's strength. Quizzard Coyotl, who had broken one of Wuxia Mughar's horns, had undoubtedly infuriated Wuxia Mughar. Roar, roar, roar. Ignoring the remaining mass-produced Wuxia Mughar in the surroundings, the original Wuxia Mughar completely let the flow of magic in his body flow freely. A huge amount of magic mixed with this extremely high decibel roar spread in all directions. Many collapsed trees on the ground were shattered by the sound waves, and countless orcs and magical beasts were also affected by the roar. Their bodies directly exploded, and the scene became extremely bloody. Quizzard Coyotl's expression only changed and she frowned. She was not affected much, but the leopard man could not take it anymore. He covered his ears and fell from the tree. Gudotsi and the others, who had rushed over from behind, also heard the roar. Gudotsi, who was careless, directly knelt on the ground, holding her head as if it was about to split open. Matthew immediately raised his shield in front of Gudotsi. Moreover, the communication between Chaldea and Gudotsi even fluctuated, and thus became unstable. Tachika, that's waving official heart. Roman, who was in Chaldea, only said a few vague words, and the communication was cut off. Hey, Doctor. Dear Leonardo da Vinci. Gudazzi knelt on the ground, holding her head with one hand and looking at the communication device on her wrist with the other. She shouted for Chaldea, but no one picked up. This voice is full of magic. It seems that the roar just now cut off the connection between you and Chaldea, Merlin said as he helped Gudazzi, who was half kneeling on the ground, up. It seems like that's the case. Gudazzi was a little helpless. How could the connection between her and Chaldea always be cut off? This once again showed that Chaldea's equipment was slightly unreliable. Matthew, who was standing in front of Gudazzi and holding his shield to block the sound waves, turned to look at Gudazzi. Senior, what should we do now? Matthew used magic defense, which was similar to a magic release skill, to buff his shield and block the sound waves. There's no other way. Let's wait for the sound waves to stop before we go and take a look. This time, they flew to the city in the dense forest in a pterosaur that could carry people. After being drawn to the human side by Wuming, Quetzalcoatl placed several large pterosaurs in the Uruk for the Uruk to perform emergency tasks, such as supporting a certain place. However, they did not expect that the first use of the pterosaurs placed in the Uruk by Quetzalcoatl would be to support Quetzalcoatl herself. Gilgamesh ordered Siduri to use the pterosaurs to bring Chaldea's people to the dense forest in the southwest. After receiving Quetzalcoatl's order, the pterosaurs would recognize the aura of a few people and treat them as half-masters. Siduri was one of them. That was why Gilgamesh asked Siduri to bring Gudazzi and the others here. Just now, while the demonic beasts were resting, Quetzalcoatl went to greet Chaldea's people and finally let Chaldea's people see the Quetzalcoatl goddess of the Three Goddesses Alliance. After that, the demonic beasts attacked again. The leopard man was the first to attack, followed by Quetzalcoatl. Gudazzi and the others who were slower than the two were left behind. By the way, Fufu was carried by Siduri and left in Eridu. Fortunately, Gudazzi and the others were left behind. Otherwise, if they had to bear the sound waves at such a close distance, Gudazzi would definitely not be able to withstand it. Even if she was lucky enough not to die, she would have fainted. Gudazzi was not a brainless protagonist in a hot-blooded manga. She was self-aware. Even if she could not help, she would not be a burden. That was why she proposed to wait for the sound waves to dissipate. Chapter 962. Although Gudazzi was worried about the feathered serpent god and the leopard man, she couldn't risk her life. Moreover, her decision would affect more than just her. Matthew, Merlin, and Anna would all be affected. As Gudazzi's descendant, Matthew would definitely support Gudazzi's decision. As for Merlin's words, it was best to leave them out for the time being. Anna doesn't have any objections, right? After that, Gudazzi looked at Anna, who had taken off her hood for some reason. Oh, yeah. I'm fine with it. Anna's face turned red. She was obviously embarrassed to take off her hood in front of so many people. I heard that Anna often helps out at a flower shop. It seems that Anna has been interacting well with others in the Uruk. She doesn't wear a hood to cover her face anymore. Big brother Merlin, I'm really happy. Merlin took the opportunity to tease Anna. However, Anna immediately turned her head and glared at Merlin as if he was a cockroach. Then, Anna put her hood back on her head and raised the undying slaughter blade in her hand. It seemed like she wanted to slash Merlin with her scythe. It seemed that Anna wasn't joking. In order to prevent the existence of an ally, Merlin, from being slashed, Gudazzi immediately mediated and changed the topic. Speaking of which, the roar that's still radiating sound waves should be from the demonic beast commander, right? Since there was no way to continue approaching the leopard man and the feathered serpent god, Gudazzi wanted to organize the information first. Merlin, who had been in Uruk for half a year and had almost become a local, replied to Gudazzi, "That's right. To be able to let out such a roar, there's no one else other than the demon commander. I reckon that the demon commander is probably Uxiu Mughar, who has the nickname of Triceratops." The main reason was that the magical beast commanders who could make such a roar were basically all dead. Apart from Uxiu Mughar, there was no other type of magical beast commander that could make such a roar. After all, the other magical beast commanders were not of the right type, so it could only be Uxiu Mughar. So the magical beast commander is this powerful. Gudazzi couldn't help but look in the direction where the sound waves were still coming from. After today's experience, Gudatsi had a new understanding of the demonic beast commander, which was definitely stronger than most of the servants. Moreover, the roar of the commander of the beasts could make Gudatsi almost fall into a coma. If the commanders of the beasts attacked the North Wall together, then would the North Wall be able to persist until now? Gudatsi had such doubts. Merlin, who saw the doubts in Gudatsi's eyes, acted as a caring big brother. Indeed, this is very strange for you, Fujimaru. Walking to the side of the clean ground, Merlin sat cross-legged with a staff in his hand, and then continued to speak. So, Fujimaru, what do you think is the ultimate goal of the beasts? Who is the enemy of the beasts? Isn't it to destroy the humans and seize the Uruk's holy grail? Gudatsi didn't think and directly blurted out. To be honest, she felt that Merlin's question was full of questions. Wasn't Gorgon's purpose already clear? Is that really the case? Merlin could not help but smile. So, if the humans are wiped out and the Holy Grail in King Gilgamesh's treasury is in their hands, will Gorgon really win? Is it not? Gudatsi was completely confused. Wasn't Gorgon's purpose to destroy the humans? Destroy the humans of this era and seize the Holy Grail in Gilgamesh's treasury. In this way, the reason of humanity will be destroyed. However, at this moment, Anna suddenly spoke. The other two goddesses will not allow Gorgon to do this. Seeing that everyone's attention had been attracted, Anna couldn't help but tighten her hood and didn't say anything else. Just as Anna said, the other two goddesses in the Three Goddesses Alliance will not allow it. Merlin spread out his hands. The Three Goddesses Alliance is nominally a joint attack on the Uruk and humans, but in fact, it is a contract made by the three parties to restrain each other. In other words, the Three Goddesses Alliance was not an alliance from the beginning, but an enemy relationship. Gudatsi nodded. The three parties will temporarily stop fighting with each other and use their own methods to take down the Uruk without affecting the other two goddesses. The winner will have the ownership of this land. However, whether it is Gorgon, Ereshkigal, or even Quetzalcoatl, they will not really give up. After that, the three parties will definitely start fighting again to see who will finally obtain the ownership of this land. Gorgon is only accumulating strength to deal with the other two goddesses. That's right. Destroying the humans in Mesopotamia is only Gorgon's idea. Whether it is Ereshkigal or Quetzalcoatl, they do not have the idea of destroying the humans in Mesopotamia. Then, Merlin briefly explained Gorgon's general plan. For Gorgon, the humans are not the enemy, but the pests that need to be destroyed. The real enemy is the other two goddesses. Therefore, the magical beast commanders think that the humans are in the bag and do not need to deal with them too seriously. They only need to deal with the humans slowly and wait for the magical beasts to reproduce. When the magical beasts reach a certain number, they can destroy the humans and the other two goddesses together. Gorgon cannot directly attack Quetzalcoatl, but he can use the magical beast commanders under his command to contain the Uruk. After that, when the other magical beast commanders break through the Uruk and obtain the Uruk, the contract of the three goddesses will naturally collapse. At that time, Gorgon will naturally besiege Quetzalcoatl with several magical beast commanders, and the Quetzalcoatl will definitely be in the bag. As for Ereshkigal, she can't leave the underworld at all. She can be dealt with last, or not at all. Anyway, Gorgon's purpose is to destroy Mesopotamia. If Ereshkigal can't come to the surface to affect her, then Gorgon will not care at all. She only needs to destroy the humans on the surface. That's about it. Merlin nodded with satisfaction at his speech. Wait a minute, Mr. Merlin. Matthew, who was still carrying the shield, could not help but turn his head to look at Merlin. It can't be helped. Merlin's speech is too shocking. How do you know about the magical beast's plan? Chapter 963. Gudatsi grabbed Merlin's neck and made a sound full of surprise. Let go. It's broken. It's going to break. Merlin rolled his eyes. For some reason, Gudatsi's excitement made him so strong that Merlin, a servant, could not break free. Gudatsi, who realized the problem, immediately let go of Merlin and apologized shyly. Sorry. Cough, cough, cough. Merlin, who was lying on the ground, touched his chest and couldn't help but sigh. I'm saved. Merlin, don't change the topic. Anna said while putting Harpa's scythe under Merlin's neck. Calm down, Anna. Are you going to kill me? Merlin was so scared that he didn't dare to move. This immortal slaughtering blade had a special effect on immortal creatures. Although Merlin had relied on half of the dream demon bloodline to survive, he did not want to gamble on whether he was considered an immortal creature or not. Whether the scythe would have any effect on him, he did not want to take the risk at all. He did not want to suffer such a blow. Merlin was very afraid of pain. Even when he bit his tongue while chanting, he would feel pain for a while. I can now cut you down as if you're in cahoots with the demonic beasts. What else do you want to say? Anna's small and cold voice was a little bit cold. Looking at Anna's eyes that were filled with coldness, Merlin could feel that if he did not explain himself clearly, Anna would really slash him with a knife. After all, Anna wanted to cut Merlin for a while, so she could take this opportunity to get rid of him. All of this is my own speculation. I extracted some information from one of the commanders of the demons, Ulidim. In addition, Quizzer, who is also a member of the Three Goddesses Alliance with Gorgon, told me something. That's why I was able to speculate. In order to prevent people from not understanding, Merlin explained in detail. After all, the plan made by the demonic beast commanders is not a top-secret plan. As long as you know that the demonic beasts will attack the Uruk from different places, then this plan will become an easy-to-understand open conspiracy. Merlin raised his hands and kept a surrendering look. Anna, can you move this away from my neck? Merlin looked at Anna with a smile and moved Harpa's scythe with his hand. You escaped, Anna said and took back the scythe from Merlin's neck. When Merlin finally calmed down, Gudatsi discovered something. Wait a minute, Merlin, in other words, Assassin also knows? After all, Wu Ming was the one who killed Ulidim. Since Merlin could extract information from Ulidim, there was no reason that Wu Ming didn't know about it. Yes, that's it. Merlin patted his sleeves and put his hand on his forehead to observe. The sound wave has almost stopped, let's go. Merlin finished and strode forward. Wait a minute. Merlin, why didn't Assassin and you tell us such important information earlier? Gudatsi, who quickly followed Merlin, asked Merlin loudly. Varen Senpai's words probably have his own reasons. Mashu, who had put away her shield, walked to Gudatsi's side and said her opinion. That's right. After all, the number of demonic beasts commanders has changed, so the demonic beasts plan will inevitably change. Villo just reserved his opinion. But Merlin, it must be because of his bad taste. Anna followed behind the three and looked at Merlin with disdain. Ah, that's too much, Anna. But Anna answered Merlin seriously. Go to hell, Merlin. Yes. Matthew, who couldn't stand it anymore, interrupted the conversation between the two. That the battlefield is in front, is it really okay to be so casual? Forget it, Matthew, don't worry about Merlin. After all, Gudatsi and the others already knew about Merlin's indecent behavior. Yes, Senior. But, I don't know how Assassin and the Northwall are doing now, I'm so worried. Miss Gudatsi, who was distracted after saying that Merlin was indecent. At that moment, Matthew could only remain silent. But that feeling of helplessness filled Matthew's face. This way, there really isn't a problem, right? Outside the North Wall, in the sky above Nippur City, Wu Ming silently looked at the ray that deflected his noble phantasm's attack, and his face turned pale. Before his Yggdrasil hit Nippur City, it was deflected by the rays released by a few giant snake heads that suddenly emerged from the hills of Nippur City. As a result, Yggdrasil only hit half of Nippur City, and half of the demonic beasts seemed to have received an order to gather on the other half of Nippur City. This caused basically no demonic beasts to be killed by this noble phantasm. Yggdrasil landed on the ground and caused a huge explosion. The smoke was dispersed by the natural wind towards the other half of Nippur City, and the dispersed Nippur City was full of mystery. He grabbed Yggdrasil, who had automatically flown back from the ground, and with a swing of his spear, he put Yggdrasil back into his Dragoness space. This is not good, Collis. How are your preparations going? I still need some time, Master. Hearing Collis's words, Wu Ming gave up on a certain idea. If that's the case, let me think of a way to get through this by myself. The difficulty that Wu Ming was talking about was the few huge snakeheads that had shot Yggdrasil's ray that deviated from its course. Wu Ming had seen those snakeheads before. They were formed by Gorgon's hair. Wu Ming had been in close contact with Gorgon last time, so he definitely would not be mistaken. Hey! An ethereal voice like that of a god echoed in the sky as if it came from all directions. Wu Ming clearly recognized that the voice came from Nippur city below. It was just that the other party had used magic to make the voice sound like it came from all directions. However, Wu Ming was very confused about the voice. From the sound of it, it seemed to be Gorgon's voice, but Gorgon would not make such meaningless shouts. Gorgon, just half a year shouldn't be enough for you to recover from your injuries. After all, Gorgon said that she would not step out of her blood shrine until she recovered from her injuries. Wu Ming was also very clear that even if Gorgon had the Holy Grail, it was impossible for her to recover from her injuries in such a short period of time. This was because the injuries that Wu Ming inflicted on Gorgon were caused by his origin force. For Gorgon, who had the origin black soil, Wu Ming's attack went deep into his bones. The magic provided by the Holy Grail that Gidia created was not enough to heal him. If that was the case, why did Gorgon come here? Why did he make that song-like sound? Chapter 964. Gorgon wouldn't lie to herself. Even if she was a magical creature, she wouldn't go back on her words. It should be said that it was because she was a magical creature that she wouldn't go back on her words. In the stories of people and things outside of humans, the ones who would go back on their words were usually the humans, which was quite ironic. Moreover, Gorgon had now inherited Tiamat's authority. She was now the goddess of magical beasts, and this identity wouldn't allow Gorgon to go back on her words. This had already escalated to a matter of dignity. What's the matter? We've had a death match before. Aren't you prepared to come out and meet this old friend of yours? However, Gorgon didn't react at all, as if she didn't hear him. In that case, Wu Ming said and raised a hand. For victory. Come to me quickly. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence, bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. Wu Ming immediately used his authority, the incarnation of the sun. A scorching fireball suddenly appeared on Wu Ming's palm, then suddenly expanded. The originally palm-sized fireball instantly became dozens of times larger, and the massive magic power it emitted made one wonder if there was a holy grail stuffed inside. At that moment, Wu Ming, who was holding the sun, also appeared rather small. Since you're not coming out, then let me invite you out? Wu Ming exerted strength from his waist, and the hand holding the sun instantly swung downward. The sun in that hand was controlled by Wu Ming's telekinesis and fell to the ground extremely slowly. Why did he have to land slowly? Because Wu Ming wanted to see how these magical beasts would meet their end. Like a heavenly fire descending to the world, the bizarre temperature of the sun scorched the ground, causing it to dry up and crack open. Even the magical beasts directly collapsed to the ground, emitting an unknown gas all over their bodies. Their bodies gradually shriveled and burned, and they couldn't be more dead. Paralysis was due to the high temperature. The unknown gas was due to the aroma of meat emitted by the high temperature. The shriveled body was due to the evaporation of the moisture in the body by Wu Ming's sun. The burning was due to the extremely dry for spontaneously combusting in the extreme heat. Even the smoke caused by Yggdrasil's explosion was quickly disappearing. Gradually, the city that was dyed red by the high temperature and began to burn gradually revealed itself. Because there were no longer any human beings in Nippur, and there were no signs of human habitation nearby, Wu Ming infused the incarnation of the sun with a lot of magic power. When there was no one around and he did not care about the gains and losses, Wu Ming could totally unleash his ultimate move, just like what he did to Yulidim back then. This was also the reason why Wu Ming wanted to come alone. In an instant, the entire city of Nippur became a city of flames. This reminded Wu Ming of the burning city of Winter Wood where he met Gadotzi and the rest. The smoke disappeared completely. Apart from the flames, there was nothing else in the entire city of Nippur. Gorgon was also nowhere to be seen, leaving only a few holes on the ground. It was obvious that Gorgon had only revealed his head that was full of snake heads, and his real body was still underground. Since you don't want to come out, then I don't have to worry about it. Wu Ming snorted and removed the control of the sun incarnation. Suddenly, the entire sun incarnation turned into a meteor that was about to fall to the ground. In the next second, the meteor fell, and Nippur finally fulfilled Wu Ming's wish and exploded. Boom! Flames completely covered Nippur, and the city that was originally built on hills was now completely flattened. Much of the land had even turned into magma due to the high temperature. The loud explosion carried a strong penetrating force as though it could penetrate one's ears. However, Wu Ming, who was in the range of the explosion, did not even blink. He silently looked at the completely transformed Nippur that was covered in flames and magma. Although his sun incarnation was indeed powerful enough to be used as a trump card, Wu Ming did not think that Gorgon would die under this move. Otherwise, Gorgon would be too easy to deal with. As expected, Gorgon's strange screams came from the magma and flames again. However, as though it was a counterattack, the screams this time were filled with magic. The magma exploded, the flames were extinguished, and thick smoke billowed into the air. "You're out." Wu Ming calmed himself down. However, in the next second, several silver-white chains rushed out from the thick smoke. Clang! Several chains with silver wedges at the end swept toward Wu Ming at a speed faster than the naked eye could see. However, these silver-white chains were greeted by silver-white chains with specks of gold. Clang, 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 clang. The ends of the chains with specks of gold also had wedges in the same shape as the silver chains. The wedges collided directly with the wedges, and a crisp sound was transmitted from the wedges to the chains for a long time. These chains with specks of gold extended from Wu Ming's arm. Wu Ming's arm that originally had nothing on it was now wrapped with a golden chain. At the same time, golden ripples appeared around Wu Ming, and several golden chains extended from it. Including the one on Wu Ming's arm, the number of golden chains was exactly the same as the silver-white chains that attacked him. The silver-white chains paused in the air for a moment, as though their users were stunned. Then, several silver-white chains turned into golden particles and dissipated, as though they were abandoned after being used up. This was quite similar to Gilgamesh's fighting style. At the same time, the chains that extended from the golden ripples around Wu Ming were also retracted. Whether it was Enkidu's automatic attack or the golden ripples around Wu Ming, they were all Enkidu's own ideas. Wu Ming didn't interfere at all. "Enkidu, are you okay?" Wu Ming, who had already guessed who attacked him with the chains, was rather worried about Enkidu. After all, in a sense, Enkidu was fighting with him just now. That's right, the silver-white chains that attacked Wu Ming just now were the fake ones that Wu Ming saw when he left the arena last time. The fake Enkidu who stole Enkidu's body. Clang, clang, clang. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, the chain that represented her gently touched Wu Ming's cheek, as if to say that she was fine, or as if to comfort Wu Ming. Enkidu knew that fighting with someone who stole her body was the last thing that Wu Ming wanted to see. Because, even if only the body was Enkidu, it was still Enkidu. Chapter 965. Don't worry about me. Although I'll show mercy to the person using your body, I won't put myself in danger. Moreover. Then Wu Ming looked down at the place where the chain had come out from. I'm afraid the opponent won't hurt me. First of all, the real purpose of the chain wasn't to pierce the enemy, but to bind the enemy. This was a very important point. Of course, piercing the enemy was also possible, but Wu Ming didn't think that he would be pierced. In order to prove this point, Wu Ming didn't move at all. He didn't defend, counterattack, or even dodge. Wu Ming wanted to see if the chain would bind him. Wu Ming bet that there was a 99% chance that the chain would bind him instead of piercing him. As for why Wu Ming felt that nothing would happen to him, and why was he so confident that the opponent wouldn't hurt him? That was because even if the opponent wasn't Enkidu on the inside, the body was still Enkidu. Wu Ming believed that as long as it was Enkidu, the opponent wouldn't hurt him. Why was Wu Ming so sure? There had to be some evidence, right? Last time, when Wu Ming was forced to leave, the fake Enkidu had developed feelings for Wu Ming. Wu Ming wasn't a block of wood, and he wasn't someone who couldn't see the details. That was why Wu Ming had seen everything clearly. It seemed like the opponent's body was affected by using Enkidu, which was why he developed feelings for Wu Ming. However, it was up to the opponent to decide what would happen. That was why Wu Ming wanted to do an experiment to see what the fake Enkidu would do to him. In the end, perhaps because he saw himself attacking Wu Ming, Enkidu couldn't hold back and attacked, which disrupted Wu Ming's plan. You should at least believe in yourself. After all, that's your body. I don't think the other party will do anything to me. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Enkidu's chain drooped down, as if he was sad to be lectured by Wuming. "All right, I'm not blaming you. Be good." Enkidu gently stroked the chain and regained his vitality. After that, Enkidu once again wrapped around Wuming's body, but this time, he didn't conceal himself. Enkidu also knew that Collis was busy, so he let her assist Wuming. The heavenly lock that had undergone an extraordinary transformation was the best weapon against deities. "It's about time." Wuming was naturally referring to Gorgon. In the thick smoke below, Enkidu was half kneeling on the scorched ground with one hand covering his head and the other supporting his body on the ground. It was obvious that he was greatly traumatized. "That's the real Enkidu," Enkidu said with a trembling voice, as if he was affected by the short exchange with the real Enkidu. "Hey!" A voice covered in magic came from the ground, and the ground covered in smoke started to crack, as if something was about to come out. So he subconsciously counterattacked because of the other party's attack. Enkidu frowned as he thought of something. Then let him cause a scene. Enkidu stood up and tried to look at Wuming through the smoke, but the magic in the smoke made Enkidu's vision quite blurry. Ugh! Enkidu couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. After confirming that there was something wrong with him, Enkidu decided to leave this place. The demonic beasts here have been wiped out. He was ready to go to other places to gather the demonic beasts and attack the north wall together with the commander. As for Wu Ming, he would leave it to her to deal with him. At this moment, from Wu Ming's perspective, a green-haired figure in white suddenly came out of the smoke and flew towards the north wall. Trying to run? Although his plan didn't come to fruition, the fact that the guy using Enkidu's body was able to escape proved that his plan was partially correct. At the very least, he could tell that the other party really didn't want to attack Wu Ming. But how could Wu Ming just watch Enkidu leave? Immediately, Wu Ming increased his telekinesis to control his body and tried to follow Enkidu. However, an attack came out of the smoke. A black ray of destruction was shot out. Luckily, Wu Ming stopped in time, or else he would have been hit. It's different from the previous ray. The purple ray that stopped Wu Ming's sun transformation was different. This time, the black ray made Wu Ming feel very dangerous. It's the ray of the demon eye of petrification. Last time when Wu Ming fought with Gorgon, Gorgon's magic eye of petrification was ineffective against Wu Ming after he revealed his true form. Now, Wu Ming's spiritual base wasn't as strong as it was when he revealed his true form. If he was hit by this ray of petrification, he would gradually turn into stone, but the speed would be as slow as a curse. Moreover, the ray shot out by Gorgon's magic eye of petrification not only had the effect of petrification, but it also had a great destructive power, just like the purple ray that Gorgon used before. The purple ray that was formed by pure magic had the power to shift Wu Ming's sun transformation. Although it didn't seem like a big deal, Wu Ming was very clear about it. After all, it was his own incarnation that was shifted. In Wu Ming's view, the sun incarnation that was in free fall wouldn't be shifted so easily. Gorgon used the purple ray to destroy a corner of the sun incarnation, causing the sun incarnation to shift in an unbalanced state. Obviously, Gorgon's ray had a very powerful destructive power, otherwise it would be impossible to destroy Wu Ming's attack. The magic eye of petrification just now was even more so. Through the petrification ray, Wu Ming could feel that if Wu Ming was hit, he would probably be knocked away. It didn't seem to be anything special, but that was only for Wu Ming. If a human was hit by that attack, they probably wouldn't even be petrified and would be completely destroyed. Really, you don't show up when you should, but show up when you shouldn't. Before, Gorgon was provoked by Wu Ming and didn't show up, but when Wu Ming was ready to chase Enkidu, she showed up again. Then, you and I will take advantage of this to decide the winner. After saying that, Wu Ming waved his hand, and several phalanxes appeared behind Wu Ming. It was the Manchala phalanx. Immediately afterward, the Manchala phalanx condensed and turned into a holy sword that looked very much like the Excalibur. This was the divine sword of salvation, the divine sword of salvation that was specially used to kill the Demon King. Today, let me see if my divine sword of salvation can kill you, Gorgon. Chapter 966. What responded to Wu Ming was Gorgon's strange cry again. After hearing it a few times, Wu Ming even felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Hey. Not only that, but several black petrification rays with a diameter of a few meters were also ejected from the thick fog. Wu-Ming raised the Savior Divine Blade high. Lightning flashed on the blade of the Savior Divine Blade, and it emitted a rather strange pale light. Clang! The sound of a sword being unsheathed came from the Savior Divine Blade. Then, Wu-Ming slashed the Savior Divine Blade at the incoming petrification rays. Countless lightning bolts collided with Gorgon's petrification rays and cut them vertically from the middle like a hot knife cutting through butter. After that, the power of the lightning bolts from the Savior Divine Blade did not weaken at all and rushed toward Gorgon in the thick fog. Chi! The thick fog was instantly split apart by the lightning bolts from the Savior Divine Blade and spread to both sides. The lightning bolts from the Savior Divine Blade finally slashed at Gorgon's tail. Although the Savior Divine Blade's attack had power left after cutting through Gorgon's petrification rays, it was not enough to cause fatal damage to Gorgon. Gorgon used his thick and tough tail to block the attack from Wu-Ming's Savior Divine Blade. Gorgon's tail was torn open. The power of the lightning bolts made Gorgon's cracked tail look like roasted meat. Wu-Ming even saw that part of Gorgon's wound was similar to cooked meat. Wu-Ming even wondered if he could smell the fragrance of meat if he was close enough. But then, Wu-Ming had a trace of doubt. Gorgon's wound had not healed. This was impossible for Gorgon, who had Tiamat's authority. Tiamat's authority would allow Gorgon to recover quickly. Last time, Gorgon did not recover because Wu-Ming's injury was caused by a trace of black mud in Gorgon's body. That was why he could not recover. But now, Gorgon did not have the slightest trace of the black mud in his body. Even if the Savior Divine Blade had a trace of origin power, this should not be the result. Then, Wu-Ming noticed something wrong again. Wait! What's that? A pair of huge and curved horns grew on Gorgon's head. Gorgon's tail could block Gorgon's body and face, but it could not block the horns. Gorgon slowly lowered his tail, causing the air to tremble. Because the thick fog had completely disappeared, a new Gorgon appeared in front of Wu-Ming. He still had the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a snake. His entire body was covered in purplish-black scales. A pair of angelic wings with golden feathers curled up behind his back. Countless long purple hair turned into giant purple snakes that swaggered around Gorgon. It could be said that apart from the addition of the huge pair of curled horns on Gorgon's head, Gorgon did not change at all. Gorgon's eyes were still the same square petrified eyes, but his eyes seemed to have lost their light as if he had lost his self-consciousness. Gorgon raised his head and looked at Wu-Ming with his lifeless eyes. Then, he slowly opened his mouth, revealing a mouthful of thin but sharp fangs. The special sound from before came out of Gorgon's mouth again, and the effect was more obvious than before. The sound, which was stronger than the sound wave, spread out in a manner visible to the naked eye with Gorgon as the center. Everything that was affected was crushed and flattened. The city of Nippur, which was originally filled with charred ground and dark ruins, was instantly razed to the ground. It even went a few meters underground. Wu-Ming could even see the dark underground passage where Gorgon was hiding. However, the sound wave did not diminish and continued to spread to the surroundings. The grassy land and specially opened roads outside Nippur instantly disappeared. Probably because the sound wave had weakened, the land was not dug up like in Nippur. However, it was not much better because after the sound wave, only bare land was left. Wu-Ming, who was flying in the sky, was also affected. The sound wave made him take a few steps back. Wu-Ming put down the arm in front of him that was used to block the sound wave, then comforted the restless Enkidu. He looked at Gorgon with a serious expression. This guy was no longer Gorgon. Wu-Ming knew this very well. This guy is Tiamat. When Wu-Ming said this, Enkidu's heaven lock became even more restless, as if he agreed with Wu-Ming's words. Wu-Ming had indeed never seen Tiamat. After all, when Wu-Ming came to the Mesopotamia and Uruk, Tiamat had already been divided into heaven and earth by the gods of the Sumer and banished to the void dimension. Therefore, Wu-Ming did not have the opportunity to see Tiamat. However, Wu-Ming had once entered the mirror world to retrieve his class card, and entering the mirror world required passing through the void dimension. Coincidentally, at the last time, in order to retrieve Gilgamesh's class card, Wu-Ming, Elia, Mei-Yu, Bazette, and the others entered the mirror world together. When passing through the void dimension, Wu-Ming inadvertently heard a voice that sounded like a poignant but beautiful song. Moreover, when Wu-Ming returned to the Mesopotamia last time, he also dreamed of Tiamat when he was sleeping by the roadside in the south. At that time, The voice in his dream was the same as the one he heard when passing through the void dimension. They were both poignant but beautiful songs. Now that he thought about it carefully, if he ignored Gorgon's mature voice, the voice that Gorgon was making at this moment could be said to be exactly the same as Tiamat's voice. So, the current Gorgon was actually Tiamat, the true goddess of the monsters. The only change that happened to Gorgon's body could prove this point. The huge pair of twisted horns on his head was obviously not something that Gorgon could have. There were no rumors in Greek mythology of monsters with such strange horns that could petrify people. There were no such records in the adapted stories or the orthodox myths. The only difference between Gorgon at this singularity was that he had accepted Tiamat's authority. Obviously, the current Gorgon had indeed been assimilated by Tiamat. No wonder you can reproduce monster commanders that are several times stronger than servants. Wuming now understood how the strengthening-type monsters and monster commanders came about. About 3 months ago, or even earlier, Gorgon, who was recuperating in the Blood Shrine and possessed Tiamat's authority, was assimilated by Tiamat's authority for some reasons that Wuming did not know. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.